When you hand a tricky task over to AI, something that needs real planning or, solving a complex problem, have you ever stopped to wonder, is it actually thinking? Like, is it truly reasoning its way through, or is it just doing something incredibly convincing that, well, looks like reasoning?
That's the fundamental question, isn't it? It gets right to the heart of what these advanced models can really do.
Exactly. And it's critical because, let's face it, we're starting to rely on AI for things where we kind of assume it's reasoning, like drafting complex plans or even debugging code.
So
Yeah.
understanding if it's genuine reasoning or maybe just sophisticated mimicry is vital.
And that's precisely what we're digging into today. We're unpacking this fascinating recent research paper that tackled this head on.
Right. They use these clever, controlled puzzle environments, things like classic logic puzzles.
Yeah, to really isolate and test how these AI models think. And maybe more importantly, pinpoint exactly where that thinking process breaks down when things get, well, complicated.
So this mission here is to use this research as our guide.
Let's go beyond the hype, understand the surprising, maybe fundamental limitations of today's AI, especially the ones designed specifically for thinking or reasoning. Let's unpack this.
Okay, so when we talk about these advanced AI models for thinking,
Mhm.
are we just talking about the usual suspects, like ChatGPT or Claude, or there's something more specific here?
That's a great distinction. The paper really focuses on what they call large reasoning models, or LRMs.
LRMs.
Yeah. Now, they're built on large language models, LLMs, but they're specialized variants. Think models like OpenAI's O1, DeepSeek R1, Claude 3.7, Sonnet Thinking, Gemini Thinking. They're explicitly designed, often fine-tuned, for reasoning tasks.
So they have this explicit goal to try to be reasoning engines. And what's their main trick? How do they try to pull off this reasoning?
Well, their key feature is generating a detailed thinking process. You might call it a reasoning trace before they give you the final answer.
Like showing their work.
Exactly like showing their work, often using techniques like chain of thought, Kokati, where they try to break the problem down into intermediate steps. The hope is, by doing this, they get better at complex problems.
Right, you'd think seeing the steps would make it more reliable.
Yeah.
But the researchers argue that our usual benchmarks, like math problems or coding tests, aren't really enough to judge true reasoning. Why not?
They raise a couple of big points. First, data contamination. These models train on just massive amounts of internet data.
Okay.
So they might have seen very, very similar problems during training. When they get it right, are they really reasoning or just remembering a pattern, like recognizing the question?
Like a student who memorized the answer key but doesn't get the concept.
Precisely. And the second thing is, traditional benchmarks usually just check the final answer. You don't see how they got there. Was it flawed logic that accidentally worked? Or a solid path? You just don't know.
So their solution was these controllable puzzle environments. That
Yeah.
sounds much cleaner.
It really is. This is where the study gets its strength. They use classics: Tower of Hanoi, checker jumping, river crossing, blocks world.
Puzzles with clear rules.
Exactly. Clear rules, but you can precisely dial up the complexity. Add more disks, more checkers, whatever. And crucially, because the rules are set, you can check every single step the AI makes. Is this move valid? Is it actually getting closer to solving it?
So you can basically watch its thinking and see if it's playing by the rules.
You got it. Take Tower of Hanoi moving disks between pegs, right? Needs planning. Change the number of disks, and the difficulty skyrockets, but the logic stays the same. It lets you see how the AI copes when things get tougher, but in a really controlled way.
Okay, so they put these reasoning models through their paces with these puzzles, cranking up the difficulty. What was the big takeaway? How did the AI hold up?
This is really the core finding, and it's striking. Performance isn't like a smooth downhill slope. It falls into these distinct patterns. They call them 3 performance regimes based on complexity.
3 regimes. Okay, interesting. What's regime 1?
Regime 1 is low complexity, and here's the surprise. For the really simple versions of these puzzles, standard LLMs, the ones without the explicit thinking steps, often performed better, or at least just as well as the specialized LRMs.
Wait, hang on. The AI, without the fancy thinking process, does better on the easy stuff. That feels backwards.
It does. And what's more, the standard LLMs were way more efficient, using fewer tokens because they weren't generating all that extra reasoning. The paper hints that the extra thinking at this low level might actually get in the way. Maybe it leads to overthinking.
Overthinking AI. Huh, okay. So standard models nail the easy tasks. What happens when the puzzles get a bit trickier?
That's regime 2. medium complexity. And this is where the LRMs finally shine. That extra thinking process, the step-by-step trace, it actually helps them handle these moderately harder problems.
Ah, okay, so standard models start to fail here.
Yeah, standard models start to struggle significantly, their accuracy drops off, but the LRMs manage to keep performing better.
Okay, so the explicit thinking pays off once the problem isn't totally trivial. Makes sense. But regime 3.
Yes, the third regime, high complexity. And this is where it gets, well, pretty concerning. They found a complete performance collapse.
Complete collapse.
Yes, beyond a certain complexity threshold, both types of models, the standard ones and the advanced LRMs built for reasoning, just hit a wall. Their accuracy drops to basically zero.
Zero. Not just worse, but totally failing.
Totally failing. Across different puzzles, different models, it's not a gentle curve down. It's like falling off a cliff. They simply cannot solve the problem correctly anymore.
Wow. So, okay, thinking about using AI yourself, for a simple email, maybe a standard model is fine, even better. For summarizing a tricky article, maybe the reasoning model helps.
Right.
But this research says there's a definite point. When the task gets genuinely complex, needing lots of precise steps, or the AI just breaks, it stops working reliably.
And here's where it gets really interesting. They didn't just look at success or failure. They looked at how the models behaved as they neared that failure point. Specifically, their thinking effort.
Measured by how much they wrote in their thinking trace,
Yeah.
like token count.
Exactly. Tokens used for the reasoning trace. Now, you'd expect them to try harder as the problem gets tougher, right? Use more tokens for thinking.
That's the logical assumption. More complex problem, more thinking needed.
And that's true up to that medium complexity point. They do initially use more tokens as things get harder. But the really counterintuitive part is this. As they get close to the complexity level where they completely collapse, they start using fewer thinking tokens.
Fewer. When the problem is hardest. That makes no sense.
It doesn't. And it wasn't like they ran out of the room. They had a huge token budget, like 64,000 tokens.
They weren't bumping up against the limit.
No. This suggests something more fundamental, a kind of scaling limitation in their ability to actually use or benefit from deeper reasoning when problems get too hard for them. It's like they disengage or reduce effort right when you'd think they'd need it most.
Almost like facing a monster final exam question. And instead of using more paper to work it out, you just scribble less.
That's a good way to put it. It points to a limit in their capacity to effectively manage complexity in that thinking space, not just a lack of trying.
And they also looked inside the black box, right?
Yep.
At the actual steps in those reasoning traces. What did that show about how they were failing?
Yeah, analyzing those thought processes revealed different internal behaviors at low complexity. You see that overthinking we talked about.
Right.
Models often find the correct solution path pretty early on in their trace, but then they just keep going, exploring wrong turns or unnecessary steps after they've already found the answer.
So they solve it, but then confuse themselves by generating more junk.
Inefficient. Very inefficient. Then, at medium complexity, the pattern flips. Here, they tend to explore the wrong paths first, earlier in their thinking. They find the correct solutions later on.
Okay, so the thinking process there is actually helping them navigate. They try wrong stuff, realize it, and eventually find the right way.
Exactly. The thinking seems to function like exploration or self-correction there. It helps them weed out the bad paths, but then high complexity.
Uh-oh, what happens then?
Complete internal failure. The analysis shows the models just fail to generate any correct solutions within their entire thought process. It's not that they get lost and find their way back. They never even find the right path at all in their attempts.
So it's not just getting the final answer wrong. Their whole internal step-by-step process just breaks down.
Completely. And get this, another really fascinating, almost unbelievable result came from the algorithm test.
Algorithm test.
For the Tower of Hanoi puzzle, the researchers didn't just ask the models to solve it, they actually gave the models the exact correct algorithm, step-by-step instructions.
They gave them the cheat sheet. Like, move disk A to peg C, then disk B to peg A.
Pretty much. They spelled out the explicit instructions in the prompt. The AI didn't have to figure out the strategy, it just had to reliably follow the steps of a known, perfect algorithm.
Okay, so surely that made them succeed at high complexity, if they just have to follow directions.
You'd think so, but no. Unexpectedly, giving them the algorithm did not improve performance compared to when they had to figure it out themselves.
Seriously?
Seriously. And that performance collapse, that cliff edge where accuracy goes to zero, it still happened at roughly the same complexity level.
That's wild. For a human, figuring out the algorithm is the hard part. Following the steps should be easy.
It is for us, or for a normal computer program, and that finding is huge. It strongly suggests the limitation isn't just about the AI's ability to find a solution strategy. It seems to be a fundamental inability to reliably execute a sequence of logical steps, precisely and consistently, especially over many, many steps. They seem to struggle with following detailed instructions, verifying their own moves against the rules, especially when the sequence gets long and complex.
So you give them the recipe, perfectly written out, and they still can't bake the cake if it has too many steps.
That's a really good analogy for this kind of failure. It points towards a limit in what you might call their symbolic reasoning or precise execution ability when a task demands applying rules over and over again perfectly.
Was this failure consistent? Did they fail the same way on all the puzzles?
That's another twist. Nope. Significant inconsistency. Models hit different ceilings, showed different failure patterns on different puzzles, even if the puzzles needed a similar number of optimal moves.
Inconsistent failure points. Can you give an example?
Yeah, the paper mentions Claude 3.7 Sonnet Thinking. On a tough Tower of Hanoi problem, 10 disks needs over 100 moves minimum. The model could often make a lot of correct moves, sometimes nearly 100, before messing up.
Okay, pretty good.
But then take river crossing. With just 3 pairs, it only needs 11 moves minimum. The same model could fail after just a few good moves, maybe only 4.
Wait. It could solve Tower of Hanoi needing, say, 31 moves, but fail river crossing needing only 11.
Exactly. It could get much further into a mathematically much harder Tower of Hanoi than a simpler river crossing. Makes no intuitive sense if it's pure reasoning.
No, it really doesn't. What's the theory there?
The paper suggests it might link back to the training data. Puzzles like Tower of Hanoi are maybe all over the web with complex examples, so models have seen similar patterns. But river crossing, especially with more than, say, 2 pairs, might be much rarer online. So the models haven't memorized or learned generalized strategies for that specific structure at higher complexities.
Meaning their so-called reasoning might be brittle, heavily reliant on recognizing patterns from training rather than a truly general logical ability that works everywhere.
That's a strong implication, yeah. Their ability might be more tied to the kinds of problems they saw during training than we might think.
Okay, so let's bring this all back home. For you listening, we use these tools. What does this research really mean for what AI does to us, and why do we use it this way?
I think it means the impressive stuff you see AI do.
Well, it isn't necessarily proof of solid, reliable reasoning that works across the board. These limits, the sudden collapse of complexity, the struggle to just follow rules precisely, the weird inconsistencies, these are why AI tools can sometimes feel unpredictable or just totally fail when you push them on something needing sustained, precise, or maybe novel thinking.
Right, you ask it to plan something really intricate or follow a detailed procedure that isn't a super common pattern it already knows, and it just stops working or gives you nonsense.
Exactly. Its thinking isn't like our deep understanding or some kind of guaranteed logic. It seems powerful, but ultimately kind of fragile. It hits hard limits, sometimes very suddenly.
So why do we use it this way? Why rely on it for tasks that feel like they need solid reasoning? Well, I think it's a mix of things. For lots of everyday stuff, the complexity is low or medium, and AI genuinely adds huge value there. Drafting emails, summarizing, brainstorming, we see that utility constantly.
Okay, fair point. It is useful for many things.
But I also think we're still kind of figuring out the edges, you know? We see amazing performance in some areas, and maybe we extrapolate too much. We assume that power just translates directly to complex reasoning everywhere. Our idea of what general AI can do might just be running ahead of the current reality, especially for complex, new, or multi-step logical tasks.
So the key takeaway for you, the listener, is
Hmm?
be critical. Don't just automatically trust AI for really complex planning or debugging tricky code or anything needing flawless step-by-step logic, especially if it's a bit unusual, something the AI might not have seen a million times in training.
Understand there's this very real complexity wall, and hitting it doesn't mean small errors. It can mean complete, unpredictable failure.
These models are amazing tools, incredibly useful for many things, especially at that low and medium complexity level. But they aren't yet these perfect logical engines that can solve any complex puzzle you give them with total reliability. Not yet.
So let's just quickly recap this deep dive. These advanced AI reasoning models, they hit sharp limits as problems get complex, often collapsing completely. They can struggle to reliably follow logical steps, even when you literally give them the rules.
Right, and their performance can be weirdly inconsistent across different kinds of problems. Their internal thinking isn't always efficient, sometimes overthinking easy stuff, sometimes failing completely on hard stuff.
This research really throws some cold water on the idea that current models have robust general reasoning that just scales up smoothly.
Which leaves us with a final thought, something to chew on. Given that even the best AI struggles with the basic logic of simple puzzles, once they get complex enough hitting a wall, sometimes unable even to follow instructions, how should we really think about integrating AI into systems where reliable, complex reasoning is absolutely critical?
Yeah, like in science or engineering or complex logistics, is it maybe time to shift the focus in AI development? Less on just mimicking thinking and more on building systems that we can verify are robustly and reliably executing well-defined steps, even if a human provides those steps. So what does this all mean?